All right. And it is the last Sunday after Epiphany. So the last Sunday before we enter into Lent is coming up. And our readings are Exodus 24, 12 through 18, which my pitch for that is Moses receives the Ten Commandments. We won't actually hear the Ten Commandments, just how Moses got them. uh, uh, Psalm 2, which is earthly rulers oppose the anointed one, but the anointed one, God's anointed, will win. Mm-hmm. Second Peter 1, chapter 1, verses 16 through 21. The power of Jesus is real, and we have seen it firsthand. And Matthew 17, 1 through 9, the Transfiguration. Jesus is transformed on a mountaintop. You will see in any of the readings that we pick, there is a clear lectionary theme, and it is we are on the mountaintop. Any of those sound interesting to anyone?
Transfiguration.
Sure. The gospel is always a good choice. All right. Let's look at the Matthew 17, 1 through 9. And would anyone like to read this passage?
I'll try if you take over if I screw it up.
Absolutely. Just give me a point if you want me to take over. Otherwise, I think it'll be perfect.
Yeah. The Transfiguration. Oh, this is NIV.
You got this.
The Transfiguration. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up to a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." That's as far as
Thank you.
Yeah. Good job.
Perfect.
It's just sometimes when that left eye tries to overdo, I can't see out of that one, so it screws things up.
No, you read that very clearly. Thank you. All right. So this is about as mystical as it gets.
Yeah.
What are everyone's thoughts?
I just can't imagine how frightened they had to be when this word says they're terrified. I know I would freak out if something like this happened. It's just, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then for Jesus just to calm them down and say, it's okay.
Well, it also feels very, I feel very, I feel a kinship with Peter in this passage, because when something overwhelming and terrifying happens, okay, what's the practical thing I can do? There are these glowing figures. Would you like a house? I know how to put up a tent. Can I do that for you?
Well, of course, each one would have been, there would have been altars made to them in it if they weren't there themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they wanted that. Well, Jesus did it different.
Yeah, I think I think what you're saying is they were not there to be worshipped, right, Don?
Right.
So why
And
do you
those
think they?
houses would have turned into houses of worship of each one and not where they should have been on just Jesus. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we in this area are all very aware of that with what's happened to Pope Leo's childhood home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
I,
happened
I
to that?
myself have never quite understood why Jesus gave the order. Don't tell anybody. When
Hmm.
he's trying to spread the word. I just never quite got
Because
that.
it's human nature to tell secrets. Hey, I've got something good for you. We're not supposed to gossip, yet we do.
That's a good question. That's a good question, Bernadine.
Because I mean
The
it's not a secret, right? Jesus is the
well,
beloved, but Jesus is the beloved. God
Hmm.
says, "This is my beloved, of whom I, am most proud." And if you're trying, I don't know, I just, he's it's kind of like Jesus Christ Superstar. Why
Hmm.
did you pick this time when there was no mass communication? So you're trying to spread the word, but you're telling some of your most trusted, loyal disciples, don't tell anyone. I
Hmm.
never quite grabbed that. I just don't understand it.
it's
Well, that's
even
not.
more it's even more obvious in Mark than it is in Matthew. Matthew does it in a few places, but the mystery of the why Jesus didn't want to announce who he was until after his resurrection is really played out in Mark. It
Hmm.
is a good question. I've never fully understand it either. I know there's timing involved, and I don't this. I'm not sure why Mark makes a point of this right now, or Matthew makes a point of it right now. Well, that Jesus doesn't want anybody to know right now. Maybe it has to do with the affirmation of the resurrection gives authenticity to what he was trying to say. I don't know, but this is interesting.
Hmm.
I, like Father Brian was saying, I feel a good deal of sympathy for Peter because he's always the one that can't just let the silence hang. He needs to speak out, and but about 75% of the time when you do it, you end up saying the wrong thing. and, and this is what happened with Peter in this instance, like we've already pointed to. Of course, we have the Moses and Elijah. Moses represents the law. Elijah represents the prophets. And this whole thing was showing to the inner three that Jesus was going to surpass those, become more important to them.
Hmm.
And maybe that's the context of why I don't tell people right now until the resurrection. And this will just be additional affirmation of the resurrection. Otherwise, people might just think you're crazy talking about, but I don't know. But anyway.
And yeah, thank you for that context, David. I think that's the metaphor of the law and the prophets is definitely an important part of this. Um, but Bernadine, you are absolutely not alone in your confusion. This has been such a major question in Christianity that there's a name for it. They call this the messianic secret. Why does Jesus keep the fact that he's the Messiah a secret? And people have been asking themselves this question since Jesus told them not to tell people. And I have heard, Don, what you were kind of alluding to, that this was a reverse psychology that Jesus was doing. That is a theory that some people have had, is if you tell everybody to keep it a secret, then of course they're going to tell everyone,
Yeah.
which I kind of like.
Yeah, I do too. That's typical. Yeah.
And I've also heard what David has said, that it's waiting for the right time, the resurrection, um, and there's some practical ideas around that of then nobody can say that, oh, you told us exactly what would happen, so it was easier for us to fake it. And so he didn't want to give away his plan so that no one could say his followers just hid the body. Um, that I've heard that, but I do think it really is kind of a mystery why Jesus would do that. And a lot of us are still working on trying to figure that out.
Jesus did the same thing with a lot of times when there were miracles or when there were parables that the people didn't understand. And then the disciples would say, well, what did you mean? And then he kind of explained to them, well, I'm giving this secret information just to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the Messianic secret is one of the more difficult things to understand, just in the timing, I could say. So, yeah.
And then I've also heard in light of the story of doubting Thomas, that it's blessed are the people who believe without even having seen the miracles. And so that's what Jesus wants from us, is to believe without having seen these specific things. And so that's why he doesn't tell people. But those are just ideas that have gone around, and maybe one of them feels like it makes sense, maybe none of them do.
I've also heard the idea that he's going to tell them to do these things knowing full well that they won't. But it's not so much because he wants it spread, it's that he's trying to show, like, say, Peter specifically, like, you're not who you think you are. Right? Like, a lot of what I think the Bible we've talked about is like showing us what we're like. And we're not who we think we are or who we want to be, right? We're not as brave as we think we are. We're not as, and the idea would be that, Peter would tell somebody and then he'd have to live with that. Like, oh, he told me not to, and look what I just did. And you see that when he denies him 3 times, right? And a lot of that is just like, I see you and I love you anyway, but you've got to come to terms with who you are before you're going to be effective in carrying my message. Like, sometimes you hear in service, like, I don't know if you heard about this in seminary, but a lot of times you hear about, like, you have to do a lot of inner work before you can be good at some of this reaching out work. And sometimes, one theory I've heard anyway, is that this don't tell anyone is his way of being like, you guys have to do some inner work. Because here you are on a mountaintop with God himself, like, look what just happened. And this is the thing I told you to do, and you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And, like, what does that say about you? And what does that say about who you are and where you've got to, like, come to some understanding about yourself before you're going to, because if you're going to be the rock I build my church on, you've got to know you will deny me 3 times, and you will tell people what you've seen, and you will be human, and that's okay. Because once you figure that out about yourself, you can go be effective and you can still be the rock. So I don't know. I always thought that was, at least for me, I like that because I am not who I always want to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's reassuring that Peter wasn't either. And so maybe this is another one of those things, but I don't know. It's a good question.
That's a good insight. I like that, Charity.
And I think there's also something that can be helpful about when we talk about the transfiguration, what we focus on is how Jesus is changed. But I think we can also think about how we have been transformed.
And also, this is not, I was just flipping back to see what all had happened in the narrative before. He's already walked on water and he's done a bunch of other things, healed a bunch of people. And so, I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't fall on my face in fear if this had happened to me, but also, like, at this point in the story, you'd feel like maybe they'd start to expect some of these things, right? And then for them, like, I think the fact that they're so terrified, they still kind of haven't really, it's like one thing to know, oh, he's God and God's his dad and he's going to be the king, but it's another thing to, like, know it deeply. Right? Like, how many things do we know and not fully like internalize? Like,
because this is not even the first time that God has spoken to Jesus directly. This is my son. The same thing happened at his baptism with John the Baptist.
Were any of these same guys there with him? That was what I couldn't remember.
That's a good question.
Because if Peter was with him then...
I do not think Peter was there, but I do know that there are different people described as being present in different Gospels.
Right. So it's like, you guys, I mean, not that you could ever get used to the voice of God coming at you, but it's, some things have been happening where this shouldn't be totally unexpected.
And I think too, if you were to see God, you know He's loving and all. But it
I
also
think,
really terrifying
I think,
of
I
what
think
I've done as
different.
a writer, you know.
Yeah.
I think the baptism of John is or Jesus by John was in one of the Gospels. Jesus had called some of the disciples, pre or at that time, and then in some of the other Gospels, the calling takes place later, afterward, after he leaves from there. So
Mhm.
there's not a great deal of they don't necessarily agree on the continuity, the exact historical context. But yeah, this was a clear statement, though. This was a clear statement to the people that were there, and Peter, James, John, that uh, God's way of working was changing. It was not going to be centered on the law and the prophets anymore. It was going to be centered on Jesus. And it was going to be a big change. It was a big change. It was something that I don't think his followers really understood until after the resurrection. That it wasn't
Mhm.
about the law and prophets primarily anymore. It was about following Jesus and what he was teaching. So this was a big wrench to their belief system.
Yeah.
This is a symbolic representation of how things were going to be changing for them.
For everyone's reference, at least in the Gospel of Matthew, um, Peter was not called until after
The baptism.
the baptism.
Well, and then to like kind of piggyback off what David was saying and what the Old Testament would have been today, in the lectionary, like Moses went up to the mountaintop and God gave him laws, right, in stone commandments. And Jesus is a sort of parallel, right? That Jesus is now going up to the mountaintop and he's not getting a list of more rules. He's getting, I love my son, right? And he's getting like love and he's getting like a cloud. And it's like, okay, we got the parallels. And so, narratively, it's like we're moving past here's 10 rules and we're moving into like, how about we like love each other, right?
And all the law and the prophets hang on this. Love your neighbor as yourself.
And let's not be afraid and let's so I feel like narratively it's structured that way. It kind of is like another
and it very directly is calling back to whichever other passage we decide to read, there is a cloud and they are up there for 6 days, and all of this Matthew is saying, look at Moses. This is like Moses,
right?
And looking even further back, the reason we're 6 days later is calling us even further back to creation. The 6 days and then the seventh day rest. So this is, once we're on this mountain, we're experiencing some sort of a new creation.
There's a lot of symbolic numbers in the Bible throughout the Old Testament. A lot of times they give specific days, but they're probably specific. Certain numbers are used over and over again to represent the fact that something significant is happening. I think that might be what's going on here too as well. And the fact that before the law that Moses brought, and I was just glancing at the Psalms passages, and the Psalms passages were talking about God on the mountain. And when rulers, when they broke the law, that God was just going to smite them. He was going to be angry. He was just going to, if they didn't obey. And I think that was the belief at the time. And I think we're moving towards a different kind of belief system. It's not so much propitiating an angry God, but entering into a relationship of love with God and love with our neighbors.
Oh, I like the way you put that.
And that's another, if we're talking about great debates within Christianity, there's the great debate of, have we learned and we misunderstood God, or has God learned? And that's a a very real conversation people have had over the centuries.
Yeah, there are whole schools of theology built on process theology, where in his interaction with man, God must have necessarily changed.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give a name to it from one
Yes.
perspective.
Thank you, David. I'm trying to remember to include when I'm referencing something to give the name of it in case anyone would like to look it up later.
Yeah.
But
that's a whole understanding there, a different understanding of God, and it process related to that is open theology, that believes that God is within time, that he is not, that he's bound within time just the same as we are, that he's not boundless, that he doesn't know every possible thing as it's going to happen. He knows all possibilities of what can happen, but because of the freedom he's given us, the fact that we make choices, then God can know everything that's knowable. He can know all the options, but he doesn't know what decision we're going to make, because if he does, how do you separate that from being predestined? And so I'm sorry, I'm going way far afield here on this, but anyway.
No, I like
It's funny you brought that up, because I was just thinking about predestination when you had said that he told Peter that he's going to deny him 3 times. So is that predestination because he knew this is what Peter's going to do, and this is what, or did Peter have any free will on that, or did God say you're going to do this? So that's what he did.
Well, I know I'm going to go home and there's going to be dishes in the sink from Daisy's lunch, even though I asked her to put them in the dishwasher. And that's not predestination. It's just me knowing.
Well,
that's just me knowing.
That's having kids.
Right? And so sometimes, it's like Daisy has free will.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would bet any amount of money that her dishes will be on the counter instead of in the dishwasher.
How would Jesus know he's going to deny him 3 times as opposed to 2 times or 1 time if it wasn't predestined? This is what.
That's a real good question, Tom. And some people would argue that this is all being told after it's all happened. And man knows what. And so that some of these things, I don't know how to say it in ways that would be acceptable or not be too out there for everyone here. But I tend to think that Matthew is trying to create a narrative here. Narrative he understands. Matthew probably wasn't there, the Matthew that was there when it was happening. It was the base. He understands what happened based on oral tradition that has come down to him, and he's trying to shape a story in a certain way. And sometimes in oral traditions, the specifics are not necessarily the most important point. It's the overall message that they're trying to get to convey.
So, and 3, I'm sorry. 3 can also just mean quite a few.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, 3 wouldn't, especially then, our ideas of we're going to measure things and we're going to be scientific and we're going to replicate them. And 3 means 3. And if we did it again, we'd get 3. That's a very modern concept. And I think at the time, 7 meant something complete. And 40 meant a whole lot.
Okay.
And 3 meant you're going to do it quite a few times.
Yeah.
Like enough so it matters, not chance. Right? David, am I way off in that, do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think in a mostly oral culture like that, you can't achieve the kind of absolute historic accuracy that we can now when we have tape recorders and things like that. So we can, everything's written down, so we have absolutely certainty about what the details are. But I don't think the purpose of Matthew or the purpose of the Bible as a whole is historic accuracy, more as to develop the message of God's relationship with his people, how it evolved. And these numbers become symbolic representations of that. So I agree with you entirely, Jerry. Yeah.
Look at me and David agreeing.
Yeah, look at that. And I agree with both of you. That yes, I think most of the time we it is not to our benefit to think of the Bible as a history book. I think that the Bible always contains truth, but each individual fact in it may or may not be true in the way that we think of in a modern sense when we are looking at the news or history. And I think that's an important distinction to draw.
Richard Rohr, who's a Catholic priest who's written a bunch of books, if you're ever wanting something to read, I like him a lot. And he said once, everything in the Bible is true. Some of it even happened. Right?
I like that. I like that.
I
like
like there's
Rohr.
more than one. I had to get my mind around that. I read a lot of Richard Rohr on my little journey. But he's like, it's all true, and it's true. There's many ways to be true. It's true. It shows you what people are like. It shows you what God's like. Some of it actually is even what we now as modern people think historically accurate.
Right.
And so it's all true, and some of it even happened. And I try to
I like that.
And he's like, it's not less true if it didn't happen exactly 3 times. Mm-hmm. It's in a way more true because 3 has a lot more ways of being true than than you could count. 3 means it means a lot to have that number on it, right? And so anyway, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but
no, it's good.
Can't not talk about Richard Rohr when
He's great.
I love that.
Yeah, his books are
I agree with you, Charity. He was very instrumental in the beginning of my, whether you want to call it deconstruction or whatever, but my changing view, because you come from a fundamentalist background or some of the backgrounds where the historical absolute truth of every statement in the Bible is so important. And when you see that there are any contradictions at all, the whole framework falls apart. And where do you land then? But when you understand that maybe that wasn't the Bible's purpose. The Bible's purpose wasn't to be a historical document, but the Bible's purpose is to lead us into a relationship with God and with Jesus, and that was and that was what I was pointing out in Psalms. It's an evolutionary process. The way people understood the Bible at the time the Psalms were written are quite different than the way I would understand the Bible. And right now, because as we've been talking about, it's more about understanding the main themes of the Bible, what is trying to be accomplished. And it's not a scientific treatise. It's not a historical book. It's a salvation history. And so anyway.
This is also the Bible is more of a library than a book.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bernadine, I'm sorry, you were saying something.
No, I like what David said, because when I was in college, and admittedly that was long ago, I took a class that was the literature of the Bible, and we just read it as a novel. And, you do start to wonder the different stories, the different ways they're told, until you come to the realization that the details are not very important. It's the end result. It's what it all drives towards. And yeah.
Well, and if anyone ever felt like having a really heady Bible study, we could always get into some source criticism and talk about how there were different authors who wrote things at different times for different purposes and different traditions, but we string them together in the same book. So we could do that sometime, but
we have done that some with the Genesis in the past. We have.
Yeah, and I took a course where we used the Oxford Bible, where it tells you first it was written in Greek or this, and then it was written in this, and here it is in Aramaic. It's been translated a lot. So
it sure has.
It sure has.
Well, we have about 6 minutes left, and because the lectionary is so good at interweaving this week, I would love for us to read one other passage, even if we don't have a lot of time to discuss it, just so we can see those connections. Is there one that we would like to read? really the Old Testament is kind of looking backwards from the gospel, and the epistle is looking forwards because it's Peter reflecting on his experience.
I think this week I signed up to read the second reading just to mix things up. I think I
Okay.
did.
Let's read what Peter has to say. The only reason I'm ignoring the psalm, not because I don't really enjoy it, David, but because the connections are stronger in the other two, and I'd like us to see that. Bernadine, can I, since you're going to be reading this, can I ask you to practice?
Sure. I hope there's okay. We did not follow cleverly devised myths when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we had been eyewitnesses of his majesty. For he received honor and glory from God the Father when that voice was conveyed to him by the majestic glory, saying, "This is my Son, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased." We ourselves heard this voice come from heaven while we were with him on the holy mountain. So we have the prophetic message more fully confirmed. You will do well to be attentive to this as a lamp shining in a dark place until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. First of all, you must understand this, that no prophecy of Scripture is a matter of one's own interpretation, because no prophecy ever came by human will, but men and women moved by the Holy Spirit spoke from God.
Thank you, Bernadine.
I did just a little research looking at this, and I wanted to see where the morning star fits in, and can't say for sure what Peter meant, but I do know in Revelation the morning star refers specifically to Jesus. So,
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I
I think
think in a culture where I think we've had this similar there are places where when it's dark, it's really dark.
Yeah.
And, you do have to wait for the morning in order to move about with any surety or safety because you don't flip a switch. They couldn't flip a switch, right? And so I think too, it's like that knowledge that there is that opportunity to see the morning star.
Mm-hmm. And David, I like that. I like the idea of Jesus rising in our hearts. I think that's a lovely image, if that is what he means by the morning star.
this is represented as an eyewitness account. That's, some doubt, but people from the school of Peter, anyway, someone who's trying to represent his teachings is saying this. And he's also saying, he's echoing exactly, what this eyewitness account is echoing what happened in the baptism. This is that God is speaking out the very same words.
Mm-hmm. I do love that. It's one of those things where we get a little more distance from the event. Peter sounds much more calm and put together in reaction to this transfiguration than he comes across in the gospel.
Definitely.
Playing it a little cooler.
Which makes sense as David referenced, that it's the people who were followers of Peter probably wanted to present him in a dignified light.
Yeah, and he also went through a lot. He's been through his denial. He was through the resurrection. He was through the transfiguration. He was out there as an apostle, sharing the gospel. And this is a more mature Peter in all kinds of ways. So yeah,
And so
Peter's always fun to me. No matter how badly I mess up, I can always refer to Peter.
I love when the apostles are relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
Because Peter's a goof.
he is.
I mean, he like falls in the water. He does all sorts of like, yeah.
He's like
There's been
He's like George Bush Jr. He's the lovable goof. That everyone's attracted to. They all want to follow him because he's got a great heart, and he's not afraid to go there when everybody won't. But sometimes he falls in the water.
How
And-
perfect.
there's been times in my own faith life where I didn't grow up in a tradition where there was a strong emphasis on having a personal relationship with Jesus. That's not the way Catholics really do things. So I have always felt kind of intimidated of this idea of talking to Jesus because Jesus is so perfect. What could I possibly have to say to Jesus? Now, Peter and Paul, I get those guys.
Yeah.
I feel like I can relate to them on a level, and that for me was a personal pathway towards Jesus. Is okay, if these guys can talk to Jesus, maybe I can too.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this passage from the epistle before we close out for the day? That is okay if not.
Yeah.
Thank you, friends. We have one more week of reading out of the lectionary, and then we will do a deep dive on an epistle. And let me know sometime in the next week or so what your thoughts are. That list again of the possible ones that I had looked at were Galatians, Ephesians, First Timothy, James, and Philippians. And people had expressed interest in Galatians, James, and Philippians. So likely we'll go with one of those three. All right.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Although you don't have a three-sided coin.
You can't
Although
find
D&D does have three-sided dice, so
Do they have three-sided? I know I've got a full set of D&D dice at home, but I think it's 4 is what I have, the smallest.
okay. I'm thinking it's been a long time since I played D&D.
That'd have to be pretty flat. I don't know how you do a 3-sided.
I also have 100 set. You rolled 2 dice to get the 100. You have one that's your 10. But if you ever feel
how do you read the numbers, Brian? No. My son has a set of D&D dice too, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and if this group ever wants to play D&D, let me know.
Yeah, well,
Dungeons
okay,
and Dragons.
Oh.
They have a group at the library in Frankfurt
fun.
for kids who don't quite fit in, and I've taken Casey there a few times. It's lovely.